Hello, and welcome to the Power of We podcast. I am your host, Nisa Brown Springman, and the founder of Ignite Your Life. Ignite is a women's holistic health, fitness, and lifestyle community. And for the past 17 years, I have had the honor, privilege, and blessing of being the recipient of the wisdom, strength, knowledge, encouragement, and inspiration that comes from being part of this incredible community. And I want you in on that. In Ignite, this is what we call the power of we. The power of we is the philosophy that Ignite is built upon, which is that two is better than one, and that God created us for community and to do life together. In this podcast, I will have conversations with a wide range of women over a wide range of topics that will provide you with wisdom, knowledge, inspiration, and encouragement. So get ready to be empowered, y'all, because here we go. Hello, Cristen.
Hi, Nisa.
Hi. So welcome to the Power of We podcast. Everyone, this is my friend, Cristen Daniels. Okay, Cristen, is it Daniel or Daniels? I always get confused on the plural or singular.
Just one Daniel.
Okay, Cristen Daniel. I have friends and cousins who are Daniels, and anyway.
I know.
So Cristen Daniel, she's my friend, and today's podcast theme is choosing joy, because that is something that Cristen has chosen to do. And Cristen has a really powerful story, one of faith and joy, I should say, just loss and sadness that has been transformed into just joy. And Cristen lives that out. And so I have been dreaming of having this conversation with Cristen and having an opportunity to help share her story, because it's one that I believe is going to uplift those of you who are listening, or maybe someone that you're going to share this with. All I know is that we are here, put on this planet, put on this earth to be a source of encouragement and joy and inspiration to others. And when we tell our stories and share our struggles, that's when we're able to be a real source of joy and strength and encouragement to others. And that's what the Power of We is all about. That's what the Power of We podcast is all about. So we're going to start with this, Cristen, before we get into the story. Would you let everyone know where you're from?
Yes, I was born and raised in Corpus Christi, Texas, which is a coastal town, so kind of a beach girl. And now I live in Austin, Texas, so not too far away.
Okay, so you live in Austin, Texas, and I have met your very sweet husband, Alan, before, but I've not had a chance to meet your children. I just stalk you on Instagram so I can see how cute they are and what great kids they are. But can you tell us your husband, give us a little bit of information about your husband, how long y'all have been married, and your kiddos.
Yeah, so Alan and I, we met in 1997, but we got married in 2002. And so that means we just celebrated our 20th anniversary, which is crazy.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And I finally used our china for the first time at Thanksgiving from 20 years ago.
I thought about doing that Thanksgiving, but I didn't. I was not brave enough to
I had to peel the tags off.
That's awesome.
Anyway, we've been together 20 years and had a lot of fun. And we have two kids. Trey is no longer a kid. He just turned 18 a few days ago, or a week or two ago. And Lauren is 15 and a sophomore. So we have a senior and a sophomore, and Trey and Lauren, and they are great kids who are just active and social and we feel pretty fortunate to that God chose us to get to parent them.
Oh, I love that. They are so precious. So of course, to have you and Alan as their parents, there's no question that they would be amazing kiddos and just full of life and love. So the reason why Cristen is my dear friend, and I feel like I've known her forever, but I really haven't. I've really only known her since January 2019. But Cristen has a very unique story, experience, I'll say your story is very unique, Cristen. And one that I know you didn't choose, would love to probably change. But the reason why I invited Cristen to have this podcast conversation with me is because Cristen is, as I explained in the intro, she has exudes joy and love and light, like people like I've never experienced for someone who's experienced such loss. And so she's going to share some of that. I have lots of questions for Cristen today because I think she oozes with wisdom, and I think she can be a source of light and guidance for those of us who are struggling in different times. So I'm going to give you a little background, and then we'll dive into some questions. So it was Memorial. It all started Memorial Day 2015. There was a pretty massive flood in and around the Austin Hill Country, Central Texas area. And at the time, I didn't know Cristen. I learned of Cristen soon after this flood occurred. So then in 2016, she began participating in Ignite, our fitness classes in Austin. And then I finally met her in January of 2019 when she attended a San Diego, one of our Renew Year retreats that we offer and we provide every January in San Diego. And that's when I really had a chance to finally get to talk to Cristen and get to know her. And so I'll give an intro into this story, Cristen, and you can certainly just stop me and interject anytime you want, but to just give a little background. So this story that as a result of the flood made national news. It started raining on Saturday, May the 23rd, that Saturday of Memorial Day, and it began flooding Saturday night and into the early Sunday morning. So Cristen's family had a river house. Cristen, how long had you all had the house?
We bought the lot in 1978 and used to park our Winnebago down there until we built the house in 1980, I believe, 81.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So Cristen had her family had this river house in off in Wimberley, Texas, which is this cute little hill country town, just about 50 minutes from Austin. And it was off of the Blanco River. Okay. Correct me. Blanco or Blanco? I hear it pronounced
Blanco.
Blanco. That's
we
how
say Blanco. The locals say Blanco.
Okay. That's what I thought. Okay. Blanco, off the Blanco River. Okay. So as a result of this torrential rainfall, the Blanco River, it rose 28 feet in an hour and a half. And after I read several articles, one of the statements from the Texas Tribune described the flood as a 40-foot wall of floodwater gushed down the Blanco River. And so
yeah, and they said like the cubic feet per second was similar to Niagara Falls.
Oh my gosh.
That wall was. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. And so Cristen's family, so her mom, her dad, her sister, her brother-in-law, her nephew, and then another family friend of four, a husband, a wife, and their two young children were all at the river house when this happened. And Cristen, where were you?
I was in Austin, actually, because we had another birthday party that one of the kids had, and the kids had their dance recitals that weekend. So actually my sister and I had talked about who was going to take Memorial Day, and I was like, we can't stay the whole weekend, so y'all take it. And we were supposed to go the next weekend with friends.
Okay. So so that we can refer to your sweet family members by their names, can you tell us the names of everyone?
Sure. So my parents were Sue and Ralph Carey, and my sister.
Did you say Ralph?
Ralph, yes.
Okay.
Ralph. Sue and Ralph Carey, and then my sister's family was Michelle and Randy and their son Will, and their last name's Charba.
Okay.
And then their best friends who were there also were the McCombs. And it's Jonathan and Laura. And then their kiddos were Andrew and Leighton.
Okay. Okay, so they were all at the river house, and when this flood just swept through the area. And where were you when you learned that they were, or that one? I mean, I know you were in Austin, so you're aware that
Right.
it was raining, but where
It
were you?
was Sunday morning, and my cousin called me. We were actually up getting ready for church, and she was like, "Have you talked to anybody? The river flooded last night," and the river had flooded. I mean, I think it had been in the bottom part of our house probably 6 times, and been in the top part of the house once or twice. So it
Did you guys
wasn't.
end up remodeling after every single one of those floods?
Yeah, I mean
Wow.
the downstairs part was more storage, so we just
Mm-hmm.
kind of got really good at cleaning it out and putting it all back in.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was like super scary right at first, because I'm like, oh shoot, let me call them. And so I started calling all the phone numbers, and nobody answered. And we, thought, well, electricity probably went out. The phones are probably dead. My mom had texted me a picture of the water coming up that night. I didn't see it till that morning. And then I turned on the news, and we saw that the High Bridge, which is Ranch Road 12, was knocked out. And it's a really high bridge. And so that was when I was like, oh, this is not good.
Mm-hmm.
So that was when we decided we need to go check on things, and situated our kids with friends so that they could go do their recital. And we literally packed up the car with waters and chargers and a wet dry vac, because that's what we would go do after a flood, was go help them clean it out. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I mean, I think that answers probably that question.
Yeah, for sure. So then, uh, when did you arrive? Did you arrive at, I'm sure, roads blocked off, and where did
So
you
we
arrive?
on the way there, we started getting. I mean, I was starting to get pretty nervous, but
Mhm.
we got a call from my godfather, who are some of my parents' best friends that had a house across the river. And he called, and he was like, "Have you talked to anybody?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "The house is gone." And I'm like, "What do you mean the house is gone?" He said, "Our house is gone, and y'all's house is gone. We're standing across the river." And at that point, I'm like, "Oh, shoot."
Mhm.
And so then we started. I mean, because it was 45-minute drive or
Mhm.
hour drive, because we had to go around the back way, because we knew that the bridge was out. So we started calling for shelters, and we stopped by one shelter. Hindsight, looking back, when I told them who we were looking for, I feel like they knew, and
Mm.
kind of already knew. Um, but they said they didn't know anything. And then Jonathan and Laura were in, crazy enough, my in-laws, so Alan's parents, Sunday school class. So his parents called us right as we were getting close to the house, or where the house was, and said, "Jonathan's in the hospital in San Antonio." And we're like, "Well, what does that mean?" Um, and so then we drove up on the lot, and I saw the house was gone, and
You were
Alan
able to
was like,
drive all the way up to their lot at that point?
"Yeah, I mean, the water, that was a crazy thing with this. The water had receded. Yeah, and we came around the back side. So the water of that river recedes and rises so fast. It's kind of crazy. But Alan said I fell to my knees, and I think everything after that, that's kind of like the moment in time when everything changed, kind of.
Mhm.
And kind of,
So your dad's or your family, your godfather across the river, their house was gone too? And were they not
Yeah,
there during the time?
no, they were there. My mom called them and said, the river is rising. Y'all need to get up and get out. And they had to climb out the back window. They couldn't even go out the front. They had to go out the back window. And like they were built into a hill, so they could climb kind of like this, scale
Mm-hmm.
up the hill. And they sat at the top of the hill and just watched their house just float away.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom had called them. I mean, she basically saved their lives and
Mm-hmm.
told them to get out. And she said, we're trying to get out. And
Mm-hmm.
because our house was kind of built on stilts, so there was nothing that it backed up to.
Mm-hmm. So, in the conversation that one of the original conversations that you and I have had about this back in 2019, I vividly recall you saying this to me. And when you were describing, you said you at some moment you heard God's voice very clear. And he said, what?
He said, I have prepared you for this.
And when did you hear that? Like, where were you and how?
It was kind of crazy. It was, I think it was the second or third day. It was not, because we had already come back to Austin. The first few nights we stayed in San Marcos, but we were driving back to the search headquarters from Austin, and I just got this wave, and kind of, it was like a wave of peace and or calming, and a flash of my life of everything he had done in my life, like all the situations he had put me in that had prepared me. And he said, I prepared you for this. And I told Alan, and Alan did not want to hear that. He was like, no, if God's talking to you, this can't be good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so
So
this was before had
we
search and rescue started at this point in time?
it had started, but we had
Mm-hmm.
not found anybody yet. So there was still the hope of that it was still early enough that people could still be alive.
Mm-hmm. And so that's really what I want to dive into, because I I think God speaks to us in so many different ways, whether it's a song that comes on the radio that gives us just the source of encouragement that we need, whether it's a conversation with a friend, whether it's we're driving down the highway and there's a billboard and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I needed to see. And then sometimes, if we're lucky, we hear God's voice. Had you ever heard his voice before?
I don't think so. I really don't think I have.
But you were certain, like it was a feeling and then a voice, because I have experienced that just a couple of times in my life, and it was very apparent.
Yes. No, I mean, I knew. I told Alan, I was like, God just told me. And he's like, well, God didn't tell me that.
Oh, okay. So then how would you say that kind of, how would you say that guided you through the next, did you keep coming back to that? How would you
I,
say you were able to uh, use that piece throughout the
well, I
next
think, I
weeks?
mean, I do think it was, that peace that surpasses all understanding. I mean, it was just, it didn't make sense
Mm-hmm.
that I was able to feel the way I did, or, um, perform the way I did, which is kind of what you're doing because you're just having to get through it. But
Mm-hmm.
he gave me just like supernatural strength. And the crazy enough thing too was I actually slept the nights when we would get home. I mean, we weren't home very long, but I mean, I am a terrible sleeper, but I slept
Mm-hmm.
every single one of those nights. So I just think it wasn't easy by any means, but I
Mm-hmm.
do think that God, I mean, the typical person would be, if you didn't have that, would have been curl up in a ball, like just in complete disarray of what to do. So I think the only way to explain it would be it was a supernatural type of strength and peace.
Yeah, a warmth that you really can't even describe.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So search and rescue had begun, and the way I had really found a connection to what was going on was we have mutual friends that I didn't even know we had at the time who were volunteering and were part of the search and rescue. And as I was thinking about that and just thinking about all the people that I recalled coming out to help, and I think, in a situation like that, help is necessary. You would
Right.
never turn it down, but I would just imagine that in that situation, when you see all these people coming out who love you, who don't even know you, but want to be helpful. I just wrote in here, I would imagine that was very humbling. But I also would imagine that was also, it made you feel comforted in the same time. But do you have any, do you recall your emotions, just seeing these people come out to help and support? And they could have, I've heard there's lots of dead animals. There was a lot
Oh,
that was a lot of things that were not pleasant to see.
right. Well, and it was, I was like just completely overwhelmed and just kind of, I felt a little guilty because I'm like, well, would I do this? Would I do this in their shoes? Because it was super dangerous. It was still in the middle of flash flooding. Like we had to call people in multiple times because it didn't stop raining for, I don't think, like 3-4 days after that. And there were like down power lines. There were snakes everywhere. I was so worried that there was going to be an incident within the incident kind of thing.
That's
And
kind of part of what I was
yeah,
curious about too, is while your main focus is your family, right? You're also seeing all these people who've come out to help and rescue your family, and people that love you don't even know you. And you're thinking about, which is typical Cristen, and I think typical just also just a female heart, like, oh my gosh, I hope you are taking care of yourself in the meantime.
right.
Thinking about others.
Yeah. And I was just worried, especially, I was like, I don't want to risk somebody else's life for, this is morbid, but for a body. I'm like, it's not worth it. So and we had, for 2 of the 3 days, it kind of grew. There were 2 days that we had, I think, 8 helicopters and 2,500 volunteers.
Wow.
That all, that met at the First Baptist Church of Wimberley. And it was crazy. There were helicopters going off from the parking lot, and everything was donated. It was like all private. None of this was, we did finally start, the county places started actually talking to us because they realized we were going to go do it on our own, whether they liked it.
Were donated. These were individuals' helicopters. Wow.
Yes. We had one of, crazy enough, one of my childhood friends who, like, I was in elementary carpool with, but hadn't talked to in 20 or 30 years. His pilot's license was a part of Texas Search and Rescue. And he was like the first, he came into the picture like day 2 or 3, and he helped to run all the helicopters. And anyway, it's just things like that were so crazy. And just back to the number of people we had, I think there were a few people who maybe had to get stitches from cuts or something like that they stepped on or branches, but there were no severe incidents, which with having that many people out and that many helicopters, I mean, they said all you had to do was throw a credit card up in the helicopter blade and it would go down. I'm like, oh my gosh.
But, just to pause for a second, this is so beautiful. And this is why one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is I know that people do things that we don't approve of. Like, everybody makes mistakes and we hear these really awful stories. Like, we're inundated with bad news. But this is how I think people, who I think people are. I think
Right.
people want to help no matter what. Like, whether it's give their helicopters or show up and search in a dangerous setting to maybe find a body.
People brought horses down from Kentucky. I mean, it was that we didn't even know. Oh, and then there's Operation Barbecue, and we had, I bet, 5 different types of food trucks / tents set up in the parking lot to feed the volunteers. I mean, it was just the outpouring of just goodness. It was overwhelming, because you just feel like I'm not worthy. But it was great. We started a Wimberley Rescue Facebook page. It started out as to be the communication with people while they were out searching. And now it has like 5,000 members on it that we still every now and then will shoot out, messages and kind of updates. But another crazy thing that was a total another God thing was some of our good friends had just started this company. It's an emergency alert contact, like software whatever that for companies to use to be able to talk to their employees during emergencies or, like if there's a lockdown or a shooter, and we were basically their beta client. Like she came in, she was like, let us use our software. And so we got to use Alert Media to communicate with everybody. And now that company has grown into, 1,000 employees. And like, she just told me that they named their conference room Wimberley, that we've been able to go back and speak with them some too, to tell them their origination story. So it's just, those are just like 3 stories. It's crazy how many of those there are.
So, when you talk about all this and just these random, what appear to be kind of coincidental things,
right?
No matter if it's a terrible situation or the best thing ever, God's timing is always perfect. And sometimes we can't see it in the moment. And I'd like to think of his timing as like he's moving something over here because he knows something over here is going to happen, but he's got to, we got to take care of this over here so this can get right. So it's all like a kind of a waiting game sometimes for us. We're like, God, your timing, why don't you just, but he's got to take care of this other thing over here. And the way I look at this is, of course he knew this was going to happen. But in the background, he was orchestrating all these things to help support when this did happen.
Right.
And I know that, the last thing he wants us to experience is a broken heart. But he knew that all these things were going to need to be in place in order to help support this search and rescue. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's one of the many amazing ways that he works. If you think of any other stories like that or examples, interrupt at any point in time, because I just think those are little miracles.
They are.
Can't be overlooked.
We call them God winks. We would be like,
oh, I love that.
Like, okay, here's another God wink.
I love that. Let's see. Okay, yeah, we've kind of covered some of the questions. I was going to say, how did it feel knowing that all these people were there to help you? Overwhelming, some of which you didn't even
Yes.
know. And I think you said something that was, I think all of us experience, just not worthy of all that.
Right.
That is a lot to receive. Um, did I mean, I know you had to receive it out of necessity. And then I'm sure, because I know your heart, you're thinking, well, how can I repay you? There's not enough
Yeah.
thank yous. Can I make you a meal? Like, what can I do?
Yeah.
Um, but I think that it's interesting how that worthiness thing creeps up in even situations like that, to just in moments of
Yeah.
needing help.
Well, and
Um,
even not worthy and making a meal. I mean, I think we had meals made for us for probably almost 3 months, and they
yeah.
did our laundry. I had people coming over doing our laundry. Ellen was like, Somebody folds my boxers a lot nicer than you do." I mean, things like that are, yeah, you just feel, but you get to the point where you're like, it was a humbling experience because I'm not one to take help, which I know a lot of women
Mhm,
are, but
mhm,
it was like, I have to let
mhm,
this happen. I have to
mhm.
sit back and, oh, and the kids had, I mean, I think they were set with play dates for probably 2 months.
Oh, well, and that reminds me, it's this saying that to not block the blessing. And I think
Hmm.
when we do push help away, even if it's something that we can see like teeny weeny, it's a blessing. And that blesses somebody else more than it even blesses us because they want to do for us or me or you or,
Right.
and that's just another God wink, you know?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So to the search and rescue, this had come up. And you and I have talked about signs from God. Obviously, there are all these signs from God. Well, He spoke to you during this time and said, I've prepared you for this. But one of the things that we had talked about was the cardinals that were so abundant in some of these fields that were being looked through during the search and rescue. And I believe that cardinals are definitely little gifts from God. I believe they're souls of those who we love that come back and visit us through way of a cardinal. They're like these little magical birds. Um, can you tell a little bit about the cardinals, like the abundance of cardinals that we're seeing
Well,
during
and
this?
yeah, and the crazy thing is, I thought it was just me. And then when I started talking to people, and especially like my sister's friends, they'd be like, oh my gosh, we would go, and there would just be cardinals everywhere. The first time it kind of really spoke to me was we'd gone back to the lot and I saw two cardinals together, and my feeling was that was my sister and Will. I don't know why, it just kind of that was,
Your
and
nephew.
yeah, my nephew. And so I think it they just always seem to appear when you need them, like when you're on that walk or you're driving somewhere and you're a little down and one just kind of flies by. I have a friend, my sister was a big workout fanatic, and one of my close friends who she was also close with my sister said she was going to Town Lake and she was finishing something up on her phone, and a cardinal got on her rearview mirror and started tapping on the window.
What?
Yeah,
Oh
like it was like my sister, like,
gosh.
and then I was in a conference once in a contemplative prayer like meeting, and they had asked me about some of my experiences, and literally there was a cardinal tapping on the window outside.
Oh
So
my
yeah,
gosh.
the I think I don't
That's just not something that happens every day. I mean, really,
know.
you don't even see cardinals all that often. At least I don't. And when I do, though, I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody's visiting me.
Yeah.
Um, so that was definitely uh, your little God wink, your
Oh
gift,
yes.
your
That's yeah.
sister. Oh
Yes.
my gosh, that's unbelievable. And then too, just normally you don't you might see a cardinal here and there, at least for me. And I'm certainly not the world traveler and don't have not had every experience known to man, but it's not like you see a lot of cardinals at one time.
No.
They're kind of, I guess I think of them as a little bit of a rarity. Well, thank you for sharing that. That is
Yeah.
unbelievable. So, um, how long into the search and rescue did you learn that you had lost your family members?
I was trying to remember what day it was. My sister was the first one that they found, and I believe it was either on the third or fourth day. Um, and it she was in San Marcos. She was super
Oh
far.
my. Wow.
So I
And can
think
you give, for somebody
look
who doesn't know proximity, the distance?
probably like 25 miles downriver. Um, and crazy enough, so I, it was, I think it was not a blessing, but the fact that it was her that was first and she was so far, I was like, she is the strongest of
Mm,
all of them. I mean, other than maybe Jonathan and Randy, but I was like, if she didn't make it, they
mm,
didn't make it.
mm-hmm.
So it kind of it set
Prepared
my
you.
expectations, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And another kind of crazy God wink was, so I told you how far away she was. On that same piece of property where they found her, they found my parents' wedding invitation that had been like transposed onto a piece of wood. I don't know if you remember how they used to do that back in the
Yes.
60s or 70s.
Mm-hmm.
It was on their land, and the one of our caseworkers was able to give it to me when they told me about my sister. So, I
Oh
mean,
my
how
goodness.
crazy is that?
Yeah, that's not even explainable.
No,
That
it's
that
not.
could have even made it through that water,
Yeah,
through the flood and the power of that water, more or less, to end up near your sister.
yeah. And I mean, you can still read the whole thing. It's still legible, and yeah, it's crazy.
Mm. Wow. Yep, for
And
sure.
then yeah, over the process of, I would say, because Will and Leighton were never found, but I feel like we found everybody else within, well, let's say 4 or 5 days, maybe 4 days.
Um, when did how long did they how long was the search and rescue? When did they close
So
it?
we, kind of the massive search that we ran out of the church, we did that for probably, well, we started out at one other place. I don't know, maybe let's say a week. And then we moved to a smaller, um, I think it was also a church, but it was a smaller church in San Marcos because we had kind of, I mean, it was crazy, like deciphered the areas of where we needed to be searching.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, for Will, because at that point it was Will and Leighton. So they ran that. Um, I mean, I would say probably another month because we did the services and then they still went back. And I left after probably about a week or week and a half to go arrange for the services. But and I kind of just I had to remove myself from it at
Mm-hmm.
that point
Mm-hmm.
because I knew what we would find and I didn't really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely understand that. Because this is so many of these questions are kind of dumb because I don't even know how you answer them. But you've gone through this and managed to come out of it joy filled. So, how, aside from just God equipping you and giving you all these little winks and lifting you up through this and having so many amazing people step in and support y'all, I mean, how do you say goodbye to 5 family members and 3 friends? Um,
Yeah,
how did you
it's
even do that, Cristen? I know you have
well,
to do what you have to do, but
right. it was really hard. We thankfully I got into therapy fairly early on, but I remember telling her, I'm like, it's not fair because you grieve your parents differently than you would grieve your loss of your sister versus the loss of a 6-year-old
Mm-hmm.
nephew, and in-laws, and you also grieve your friends differently. I mean, and you grieve children differently. And so it was kind of not fair because I was almost forced to put them all in one bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I will say it was like one day I would just be really sad and feeling it from my dad, and I would do that dad grieving. And so it was just a myriad of emotions,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that that I would just have to go through, and it didn't seem natural,
Mm-hmm.
so it was almost overwhelming. And I asked one of my therapists because I'd heard that it takes, I think, 2 years to kind of to get through the whole, not grief process. I mean, you never get over anybody, but kind of go through the grief. I was like, so is this going to take me 10 years?
Right.
Because is it 2 times 5? I can't do
Mm-hmm.
this for 10 years.
Mm-mm.
Um, but she said, she was like, I bet it's going to be about 4. And crazy enough, I think it was 4 was kind of when I finally got over the hump.
So how soon after did you get into therapy, and then how did you find this person so quickly?
Um, I don't remember. I tried a couple of different people that were kind of just referrals from friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found this, and we tried, some couples. I mean, we were just kind of trying it all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I found this one lady who I had been referred to from a friend who had lost her husband. And this therapist had also lost her husband. So she was just kind of inadvertently became kind of the grief therapist,
Mm-hmm.
just because she had been through all the array of emotions and everything. So she was really a godsend because she just kind of helped encourage me that, things were going to get better and it wasn't going to be like this forever. And the things that I was going through was normal. I mean, she kept an eye on me and she was like, you're not depressed. You're just sad. So don't worry about being too depressed. You're
Mm-hmm.
not there.
Yeah, take that one
So,
off of the things to worry about. Yeah.
exactly. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think I'm very glad. I think Alan kind of maybe forced me to do that. If I'm a lot of things, I don't really quite remember
Yeah.
everything, but he forced me to do a lot of things. So I think that was probably one of them.
Mm-hmm. So, how about your children? How do you even begin? Because how old were they at the time?
They were 7 and 10, and I I remember when we told them that the house was gone. We waited a whole day. We did search for the first day and then spent the night in San Marcos and did the second day, and then went home that evening. And we tried to downplay it and just said, we don't know that the house is missing. We can't find them. And I'm, I remember, Trey just lost it, and my daughter was like, or maybe this was, no, I take this back. This was when we told her that they'd found my sister.
Mm-hmm.
And sh- she was like, yay, she's with Jesus now. And I'm
Mm.
like, oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Not yay, but
Yeah.
thanks for saying that.
Like out of the mouths of babes, right? You're like, you're so right.
Exactly.
Yes. I wish I could.
Yes.
It's not
I wish I
right.
could feel that joy, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't. But
Mm-hmm.
it was, it there again has been they they did not have a normal childhood by any
Mm-hmm.
means. And so they Trey went through a lot of anger, and um Lauren has gone through a lot of kind of OCD,
Mm.
separation anxiety. She was there for a long time. Every time we left the house, she was afraid we wouldn't come back, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it has not been an easy road, but I will say I think they've got a perspective of life that's not of a 15 and 18-year
No,
old.
they see it a little differently.
Yeah.
And again, it's not that we would ever choose death, but I experienced the death of a best friend we were going to be freshmen in high school, and this terrible
Mm.
car accident when I was, yeah, terrible car accident in the summer. She died. Um, and I was recently talking to my kids about it. And I said, there's something about that changed my perspective. I would say I'd never had a perspective that life should not be taken very seriously, and it's not precious, because it was. But losing her at such an early age and experiencing such grief, I actually lost her and another classmate at the same time, but they were all in the same
Wow.
car. And it just made me see life differently and
Mm-hmm.
appreciate it, and not maybe not be as dangerous as the typical like high schooler might, but
Mm-hmm.
make decisions a little differently, because the outcome can be something really terrible. Um,
Right.
anyway, and again, I know that's not what you would choose, but I can imagine their maturity is
Yeah.
and understanding of life is on another level from that of a
Yeah.
18-year-old and a 15-year-old. Um, so okay, I did not know you before this, but I have a strong suspicion that, because I know your friends, that you have always been so fun and the life of the party, and never one to not just live a big fun life and to choose joy. But you have made a conscious decision to choose joy. You That's, I know, a hashtag of yours. It's a motto of yours. And so I'm just curious, when did you decide to make that your motto?
I don't know. And the crazy thing is, I feel like it was, I don't know where I don't know if I came up with it. I don't know if I came across it, but I remember when I first started Ignite, y'all had the Choose Joy shirts. And I was like, this is another God wink of where I'm
Mhm.
supposed to be.
That's it.
So I know I had come up with it right before that because I was like, oh, thanks, God. I appreciate it. And
Yes.
I could get a shirt with my motto on it. But I really don't I don't know where it came from. I think it was just something that God laid on my heart,
Mm-hmm.
either through a letter that, a card that maybe somebody gave me, or what. It just seemed to encompass. I mean, a part of it too was a reminder to myself, like, okay, we got to choose joy. We can't choose sadness,
Mm-hmm.
we can't choose the
Mm-hmm.
opposite. We got to choose joy.
Right.
And it
Right.
is a choice, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you had going through grief, you have to choose to not let yourself go in one direction. You have to choose to go in the other direction
And that's
because the
not to say
natural.
that you don't acknowledge that you don't go through, like, you go through that natural grieving process, but
Oh, for sure.
and that you experience all of those
Oh,
cycles.
yes.
But so how would you say, okay, so I want to share this. So in James 1, 2 through 4, here's the Bible verse. It says, "Consider it pure joy, brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." And so I had just never thought, I'd never looked at it, the word consider it
Mm-hmm.
pure joy, which is an action word with is a choice. You have to,
Right.
it is a mindset to consider it joy. So um how would you say you actively choose joy? What does that look like? What did that look like for you? Not when you first came up with, like, this is going to be how we live and this is going to be my motto. But how does that look for you?
Well, and it's so funny that you read that verse because there was I was reading this devotional book, and this quote, I just wrote it down the other day. Joy isn't about what happens in our lives that is happiness. Joy is about how God is at work in the things that happen for our greater kingdom and
Mm-hmm.
purpose. God can and will redeem anything he allows in our lives. So I think, I mean, I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. She put it in such more eloquent words than I could, but I think I choose joy kind of by gratitude of how God is using others in my life and how he's using me in others' lives. Like
Mm-hmm.
when, just to go back to, uh, the search of how many God winks and just kind things that happened, I started kind of trying to journal them and write them down so that I could go back to look at those when I got really sad or mad or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And then also, as time has kind of gone on, God has used me to help others who are grieving. A lot of more of my friends have lost their parents, and I've been able to kind of help navigate them through the grief process. And I think that is a part of the joy of all of this. It doesn't seem
Mm-hmm.
like it, but it's in a
Mm-hmm.
way that God's able to redeem this, because if I feel like choosing joy is me trying to redeem this situation, because otherwise then it happens for nothing other than to
Mm-hmm.
cause a lot of pain to a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people. So
Mm-hmm.
if we can bring something good out of it, then it won't be that it happened for naught.
Right, totally. And I think there's some confusion. I feel like there's a hyper focus on being happy. Happy, happy.
Mm-hmm.
We have to always be happy, and that's just not. Or do what makes you
No.
happy. Happy, happy.
Right.
Um and I think that is a lie that will keep us chasing our tails, because
Right.
we are not, like, to choose joy does not mean we're happy
Right.
necessarily. It
Mm-mm.
just means we acknowledge that the situation, we're fixing our focus on gratitude. We're acknowledging
Right.
the goodness that God is able to bring out of something
Mm-hmm.
terrible that may not be apparent right then and there. But I think there's a
Right.
huge difference between happiness and joy. Joy
Yes.
is, uh, yeah, it endures. I thank you for sharing that. So back to um, gratitude, and you saying you didn't want to, you like, have all this be for nothing. I think you do such an extraordinary job of honoring your family members. And as I told you when we were talking before we started the podcast, I feel like I know your family members because you have, the way you post about them and just such, and you honor them and you celebrate them still. I feel like I know them. And so I went to your Instagram page and was looking back on some of your pictures, and your mom just had her birthday, right?
Yes.
Yes. How old was
Yes.
she
She would have
again?
been 79. Which,
79. She was a
yeah.
very beautiful
She
Southern
would have been a
belle.
glamorous 79.
She was a glamorous,
Yeah.
whatever, all the birthday posts and pictures that you've posted of her. She is gorgeous. So I'm going to start with your sister, Michelle. So you described her on her 50th birthday. You wished her a happy heavenly 50th birthday. Um, and you said she was vivacious and a workout nut, and that's exciting,
Hmm.
and persistent. She's going to let you know that she's there, being the cardinal who's like,
Yeah.
hey, you see me? Does that match her personality a little bit?
Yes. She never met a stranger. Um, she was, I called her sister, pretty much all of her life. And the funny thing, like my close friends called her sister, our cousins called her sister. I mean, I still have a hard time calling her Michelle because
Yeah.
And then her aunt name for my kids was Sissy. So she was either Sissy or sister. But that is kind of like, she was everybody's sister. I mean, she was just kind-hearted, but not in a gushy way, but more in a vivacious kind of, what are you doing today? Oh, you got to, and I mean, she would do it with the waiter or the person working in produce. I mean, she knew everybody's name and all their stories. And, we'd be going through HEB. Oh, there's Vivian. Her daughter, so-and-so, has got a choir performance tomorrow. How did it go? It's just, she was just, I was the shy one in the family, and my sister and my mom were, I mean, they just never met a stranger and would talk to a wall if you would let them.
So big personality. And I
Yes.
think you're the life of the parties, but it sounds like Michelle was really the life of the party.
She was more, yes. I had to kind of force myself out from behind my mom's skirt and hiding behind it. And as I realized, if I didn't, I would just be left behind with my social family.
Yeah. How old would Michelle be today?
She would be 51. Since September, she turned 51.
Okay. And so uh, on her 50th birthday post, you said, "Life is not as fun without you, but we are trying to have fun." Then your hashtag was choose joy. And so I'm just curious, and I should have asked this a while ago, but how are you not angry with God?
I wouldn't say I don't get mad,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. I think that's another one of the crazy miracles that have come out of this. That I, I mean, I've thrown myself on the floor in the first few days, like why? But I
Mm-hmm.
have been fortunate enough to where God placed in my heart, you're not going to know the why.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave up trying to figure out why really early on, which I think
Mm-hmm.
helped with not have the anger because so now it's the what. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that gives me something to look forward to instead of trying to look back on and just dwell on something that we're never going to know.
I love that so much. So you focus on the what versus the why. And what
Yes.
about the what, Cristen? Like, what am I going to do with this?
Yes. Or what is
Okay.
God going to do with this?
Oh, that's so good.
Um, so yeah, what can we do with this?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I felt the pressure from early on of, I remember telling my therapist this one time, like, I feel the pressure that I have to do something with this to make sure it's redeemed in, as much as it can be. And, my therapist would be like, you getting out of bed every day and
Mm-hmm.
going on about your life is enough. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never thought about that, but I can definitely see how, you're the survivor from your family, that would, alongside with the guilt, but that would be,
yeah,
um, feel like a ton of pressure. How do I do this? How do I make this right? Instead, like,
right.
you, you take care of your family and let God guide this ship.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
I know we
amazing.
tried to like write a book early on or do but I mean, we were meeting with people and because Alan really felt that too. And
Mhm.
we just realized it wasn't time. And I'm like, we need to like just let, I, it's cliche, but let go and let God. Like,
Mhm.
let's let God guide when it's right for us to do whatever we need to be
Mhm.
doing.
Oh, well, I'm excited. Well, this is the what is already, I mean, the way you live your life and the way you honor them is clearly you're beautifully taking care of that what part. But I'm excited to see what else. Like, what is God going to do? And that you're just so open, you know, to letting him do what he's going to do.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty spectacular. Okay, so about your spunky 79-year-old mom.
Mm-hmm.
Describe her. Well, let me write. In her 75th birthday post, you said she taught me how not to care about what others thought and how to stand up for what I knew was right, all with a lot of fun mixed in. I'm realizing in my older years how much her old school values really shaped me, and I pray I can be the same mom to my kiddos and be as cool as she was doing it. Can you give a little insight into that?
Yeah. So, my mom, she marched to the beat of her own drum. Like she did not, she was pretty, she had her own style that everybody knew and just loved and appreciated. She didn't
Like,
care.
what was that?
I don't even know how to describe it. Like sometimes she would change clothes like maybe 3 times a day. Like, oh, well, that's my go to the grocery store. That's not dressing enough to go to dinner. Or, I mean, it was
Right.
where I feel like in our, day and age, we run around in our leggings, our workout clothes all day
Yes.
long. But,
You'd be
um,
appalled.
oh, she volunteered once at our after school kids Bible study thing once, and she was like, I have never seen so many grown women in their workout clothes.
Oh my gosh, that is
Yeah,
that is that generation.
yeah.
Yes.
And
Uh-huh.
she called it putting on her face. She put on her
Uh-huh.
makeup every day, no matter, and she wore false eyelashes every, like, old school, put on the glue, put the
Uh-huh.
eyelashes on. And so that is where I kind of where I talk about the old school. I mean,
Yeah,
she was,
love it.
and she was very much into etiquette and kind of what was right. I mean, but not in a stuffy way, but
Yeah.
she, she made it fun, but we knew what was appropriate, and, um, it never seemed kind of like a chore. It was kind of looking back. I just kind of assumed everybody knew that. Then you get out in the real world, you're like, oh, you didn't know you were
Yes.
supposed to do that anyway. So,
Works through over here and this is over here. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And
Uh-huh.
she, I think too, for, the 90s, I think she was a lot more open to talking, to my sister and I just about her life too, which I
Mhm.
think a lot of parents didn't do back then, just about her past relationships and mistakes. And, she's
Mhm.
like, oh, I came home from the senior prom engaged. That was the worst decision of my life. And she was the one that did all the girls' hair and makeup before, the prom, any of the dances and stuff. So we always got ready at our house. So she was kind of, and when we would spend the night at our house and would have a pile of girls in my room, she'd have to walk around and kiss everybody on the head goodnight.
Oh.
Um, Alan even said when we first got married and she came in and tucked us in, he was like, is this really going to happen every time?
That's so great. Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
She just sounds to me like your typical Southern belle,
Yes.
who loved her family and took so much pride and joy, a ton of pride in her appearance. It's important to her
Mm-hmm.
that when she presented herself in such a way, but also just a ton of pride in her family, being the
Yeah.
best mama. What did y'all call
Yeah.
her grandmother?
She was Susu. So
Susu.
her
Okay.
Susu, her name was Sue. So she was one of the ones, she was like, there's no way. I'm not having a grandma or granny or no, not even a Mimi. Like
Right.
I need
Yes,
a name that's not a grandmother name. So yeah, she came up with
totally.
Susu.
That sounds like my mom, actually. A lot of what you're
Yeah.
saying about your mom reminds me of my mom.
Uh-huh.
So, what would you say some of your best moms, your mom's best encouragement or wisdom was?
I think, from an early age, I feel like she just kind of ingrained us with, to treat others the way we would want to be treated, or, put others before yourself. The other thing I loved that, we never had a closed door policy in our house. I mean, we could be sitting down to eat dinner and friends would drop by and we would just kind of put it aside and go sit in the living room and grab a drink and talk. And then maybe we didn't eat dinner till 10 o'clock, but, um, we just had kind of, and then that kind of happened as my sister and I had friends, people just knew that they were always welcome at our house. And so I loved that aspect of them, because sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you just
Right.
don't
Like,
want
I just
people in
don't
your
want to
house.
have. I've told this to my children because we have a very similar setup in our house too,
Yeah,
and I'm like, no, no friends today. I just don't want
I
to
know.
wear a
Just need a little
bra.
break.
Okay, no bra
Just a little
day
break.
for me.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
or
And
just to be able
she
to
had,
plop yourself down on the couch without,
right,
anybody talking to you. Sorry, go ahead.
right. No, and yeah, but I think it was more innate, and I haven't put the pressure on me to have to be just like that, because that's not 100% my personality. But it's a good reminder. And even Alan says it too. He's like, tries to make sure he has everybody's drink that they like, because he's like, your parents were so good about
Oh, mm-hmm.
making sure. And then another one of she had a lot of funny kind of, uh, she just had all kinds of funny little statements that she would say. And one of my friends' favorite advice that she gave all of us was, she's like, now, girls, if you go to these high school parties and they're drinking there, you just get yourself a Miller Lite can. You can pour that out. You go to the bathroom and you put water in it, and you can just drink it. You just drink the water out of the can. And she, and I can't tell you how many of my friends said they did that. And now my friends are telling their kids that too.
That
Like,
is, I'm writing that down right here.
just grab a can, pour it
Yep.
out, put some water in it, and then nobody's going to question you, like, why are you not drinking? It
Mm-hmm.
was just, she kind of had a more realistic, instead of saying just don't drink. Anyway,
Yeah.
she had all kinds of little funny things like that, but that one is the one that always keeps coming back. I always have friends who are like, I'm telling my kids that now.
I'm
Your mom
passing that
taught me.
on. I'm going to tell them Sue's. We have Sue's wisdom. Okay, so you mentioned your dad was that Alan's always wanting to make sure people have they come over the cup, they come over to their house, they have their drinks, and he was that Alan is maybe helping or trying to pass along those sweet host
Hmm.
um, uh, tendencies that your parents had.
Yeah.
But you called your dad the ultimate host in one of your posts. You said, I was thankful for how he taught me to love and respect myself and my beliefs, and how to stand for strong principles. These lessons have carried me through the times, and I've never forgotten. And you described him as being the ultimate host. Was he part? Did he have a similar? Did he partner with your mom with just an open door policy?
Yes, I think he was raised in a little bit different background than my mom. Was probably raised more similar to how we were raised, where it was a little bit more um, social. His family was a lot more reserved, and so I think he kind of craved a little change. I think deep
Mm,
down he was a much more outgoing person, and so when he and my mom got together, I think that was part of what he was most attracted to, was just her
mm.
vivacious way of living. Because I think he didn't always enjoy it. He'd be like, Sue, we're not doing this tonight. But
Yeah,
he he
understood.
would. We always had a big Christmas night party, and he would make it around and talk to every single person and find out what they're doing and what their kids were doing. And he did that really well too with all of my friends. My guy friends just loved my dad. They would invite him when they got older. They'd be like, Dr. C, come on out here and have a beer with us. So um, he just did a really good job of engaging in other people's um, in their lives. So and then you said something else. He on the principles. I was terrified to disappoint my dad, which I don't know how. My cousin and I have talked about it because she had the same feeling with her dad. And it wasn't like we were afraid of them. It was just a healthy respect of, I
Mm-hmm.
can't do that because my dad will be disappointed in me. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the last thing and I don't know how he ingrained that in us, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that gave me a respect for myself that others didn't have. And therefore, I didn't do a lot of things that others did in the teenage years,
Mm-hmm.
just because I didn't want to disappoint him. And I mean, he even said something one time when I was graduating college, and I said I was going to go visit. It was an old boyfriend that we were friends. And I said, I'm going to go visit him for spring break. And he said, and I was going to pay for it. I had the money. He said, Cristen, that's fine, but I just want to let you know I don't approve, but you can still go. And guess who didn't go? Guess whose 22 self didn't go
Oh,
on that trip?
yes. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, it wasn't like he was going to write me off. I mean, I was already out on my own basically at that point anyway, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There was something, and I was, when it came to getting married, and I was just so thankful that I
Mm-hmm.
had, um, had the morals and things that I don't really know how he instilled them, but
Mm-hmm.
he did a good job of that.
You know, Russell and I talk a lot about that because just the other day this came up with us and the kids, there's a different relationship that children have with their mother versus their father. And
Mm-hmm.
with us, like we're the warm and fuzzy, you know, at least in our family. And I know you're warm and fuzzy too. But like Russell, my dad, for me, he just had to look a certain way and it put the literal fear of God in me.
Mm-hmm.
But and then if he said something, it was stern and it like cut to the core, you know? And
Yep.
so I grew up the exact same way. Like the last thing I want to do is get one of those looks or disappoint my dad. I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
disappoint my mom either, but I knew if
Right.
I disappointed her, it wasn't going to hurt as bad, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And that's the other day that came out of Durant. He said something about I forget what the scenario was. And he's like, well, I'm not afraid of getting trouble. I said, are you afraid of disappointing us? He was like, yeah, like, I just don't want to disappoint y'all. It's like, good. That's a good
Yeah,
thing.
that's good. That is
Yeah.
good.
And I was like, that's totally normal. That's healthy. And, you know, these dads just their tone, their presence, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what you're talking about. It's definitely what I experienced.
Heck,
And
yeah.
sometimes, and now I understand now that have my own father and married to the father of our children. It has allowed me to understand God the Father more.
Mm.
Like I don't want to disappoint God. You know, I don't want
Yeah.
to if I do these things knowing that it is not what he is saying is going to lead me in the right way or isn't pleasing to him, like I don't want to disappoint him. And that's the same
Yeah.
kind of fear that I feel and felt in disappointing my own father. And I still don't
Right.
want to disappoint my own father. You know, you never grow out of that. Um,
No.
so I love that. That makes so much sense. Um, and you talk about your last name, your married or your maiden name was Carey,
Mm-hmm.
Cristen Carey. And
Yeah.
you oftentimes would say, right in your post, these values carried me through or carried on. Is that something you came up
Mm-hmm.
with after they passed, or was that something that you
Yes.
had
Yeah.
had before?
No, it happened after one of my sister's sweet friends. It was one of her work friends. They were doing a benefit thing for her. And she had these little, my sister loves Chardonnay. So she had these little wine stoppers made that said carry on, spelled Carey, and then on. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So then I just have
Mhm.
been tagging on carry on to choose joy because I feel
I
like
love that.
that's what we are doing. We are carrying
Yep.
on
Yep.
even when we
That's
don't want to.
yep. Even we don't want to. You're exactly right. Okay, sweet Will. How old was Will?
He was 6.
He was 6. Um,
Yes.
I, you shared an experience with me that I want you to talk about, but can you describe Will? I mean, I can only imagine what a sweet heart he
He,
was.
yeah, he was the only child, so he was just sweet spirited, got along great with adults because he was an only child, and so he was
Mhm.
always with the adults. But he had this really high voice, which I don't know if it was his age, but I felt like it was higher than usual. And so, which just made him even sweeter. And he called me Chrissy, and so I can just hear his voice, and it's like Chrissy. Um, but he loved our kids. They kind of we don't have a big family, so I mean they were kind of his big brother and sister, and Lauren and he were really close because they were really only 18 months apart. So they just loved each other. I mean,
Mhm.
hanging out with each other. And he was a very inquisitive kid and felt like he was pretty smart. I mean, at 6, you don't know, but he just seemed through his inquisitiveness, he was the one that always asking questions and wanting to know more. So and didn't mind hanging out with the adults. So he was, yeah.
Did he have a big personality like your sister?
He really didn't. He was a little bit shyer, which Randy was kind of her. Michelle's husband was a
Mhm.
little bit more reserved. I mean, he liked being social, but he kind of stood back a little bit from her personality. So I
Yeah.
think he had a little bit more of he was a little bit shyer and a little more reserved than Michelle.
And you had shared this story with me, talking about just how a God wink, God speaks through all things. He's the creator of all things, even little ladybugs. And you had mentioned that you had an experience with the ladybug.
Yes, this was bizarre. But it was probably, let's see, I think it was around November of 2015. So the flood was in
Mhm.
May. And we were about to start remodeling our house right when the flood happened. So then we stopped that and we kind of picked it back up right around then. And so we had moved into a rental house. And the bathroom, in the bathroom, there was a ladybug. And I just kind of looked up, it was on the bathroom mirror. And I, here again, audibly could hear Will's voice in my head. And it was, "Hi, Chrissy." And I was like looking around and I kind of started talking back to him like, "Hi, Will." And he like told me what he was doing in heaven. Like he was like, "Lily, who was Leighton, Lily and I went sledding today, Mommy and Laura are," and I mean, all these things that I couldn't even come up with. It was really bizarre. And so then that was kind of the most in-depth conversation. But this ladybug lived in my bathroom, which I don't even know ladybugs live this long, for probably like 3 weeks. It was always there. And every now and then I'd be like, "Hey, Will," and I don't get anything, but then sometimes I'd just get a "Hi, Chrissy," and another like random
Oh, you
thing, like,
would get
"We're having
something.
ice cream."
Oh, so this was you. Whoa, I did not know this part. So the ladybug continued to live in the bathroom for 3 weeks, and sometimes it would speak to you. Will would speak to you through the ladybug
Yeah, yeah.
more than just that one time.
Yeah, it was the weirdest
Oh,
thing. I mean, I loved it, but then when I tell the story, people kind of look at me crazy. I'm like, I know, but
I don't think it's
I
crazy at
can't make this
all.
up. I can't make it up.
I think it's amazing.
And
If this
so,
is, oh, wow.
and then his birthday was in January. After that, their school got a ton of ladybugs, and all the students released balloons and ladybugs into the air, and it was just so sweet.
So had you told them about this, the ladybugs, or was this
Yes, I
brand
told,
new? Okay.
well, yeah, I did a Facebook post. And so that's why a lot of people learned about it. So the school, I was friends with the headmaster at the school and then also some of Will's teachers. And so they learned about it from my Facebook post. And they were like, would you care if we bring this ladybug thing into his birthday celebration? I was like, of course not. That'd be amazing. So, yeah, now every time, I mean, and that there again, it is crazy when the ladybugs show up. It's when it would be Will. We were like at the aquarium or something, and that'll be like when a ladybug will land on Lauren's arm or something like that. And we were doing something fun the other day, and like three ladybugs land. We were like, okay, Will, we hear you.
Oh
So,
my gosh. Really? Just
yeah.
recently?
Yes, just the other day we were like, we were almost, I wouldn't say swatting them. Where were we? Not swatting them away, but like we had like three or four ladybugs landing on us. We were out, I can't even remember where we were, but it was
Was there
Lauren
anything
and me.
significant about that day that, or was just a normal
No,
day?
I think we were outside doing something fun. I mean, I feel like it's always when we're doing something fun and kind of kid-hearted,
Uh-huh.
is when, and people send me things too, like, a picture of a ladybug, like, look who came and joined me on my run today or something like that. So,
Oh my goodness. I did not know the depth of that story.
yeah,
Wow.
it is. If you dig further back in my Facebook post, you can find
I did not, I made the mistake of not looking on Facebook. Dang it. I should have, but I will go back and dig. Oh,
it.
wow. Thank you for sharing that. And for anybody who's lost anybody, that would give me such solace in knowing
It's,
that
yeah.
did those things give you
Oh,
comfort?
oh, for sure. I mean, there are, yes, I mean, all of the things. I mean, we have rainbows. One day on my birthday, I was having a bad day and I went on a walk and I looked up and there was like a triple rainbow over our house. And I feel like
Gosh.
rainbows always show up too when we had a Texar event and we all got there and it had been raining and all of a sudden there was a rainbow over the event center. I mean, and so, and then the other, since we're talking animals, my mom, I've described her personality. She is a hummingbird to all of us. She loved
Hmm.
hummingbirds. She kind of
Hmm.
joked that they were, and yeah. And so, and it kind of matches her spicy, kind of fast personality. But yeah, whenever we see a hummingbird, we're just kind of like, hi, Susu. And
Hmm.
then my dad loved the ocean. He loved scuba diving. And one day, one year, we were out on the in Port Aransas, and he loved the dolphins. And the dolphins on his birthday were just like out in full force. And we're like, okay, we see you, Dad. And then last summer, we were scuba diving in St. John, and the kids haven't been that many times. I think they've only been three times. And all of a sudden, these two dolphins started swimming with us, like scuba diving with us, like just swimming in. Like one came just right over Trey's head. And I mean, I was like, that was totally my dad saying, I'm so glad you took them scuba diving because he wanted
Oh
them to get certified
no.
so bad. And when we got back on the boat, the dive instructors were like, yeah, that's never happened ever. Like
Oh my gosh.
they said, the dolphins don't come out here. We're too far out from from the coastline. They don't come this far out. And anyway, so it's
And
just
you're like, well, I
I'm
think
like,
there's a bit of
I
a
got
story behind.
connections. I got
Did you
connections. It doesn't
ever?
surprise me.
Did you tell them? Did you say, well, we're kind of not surprised. This things
I
that was
think
my
I might
dad.
have said it. Yeah, I didn't get too much into it because sometimes people start to think you're crazy if you haven't heard the full story. But
Oh, oh, I love that so much. Speaking of ladybirds, so I'm sorry, ladybug, not ladybugs, hummingbirds. Um, Russell's mom, she's passed and has been gone for 19 years. And she loved hummingbirds too. And we share the same birthday. So on my birthday last year, I was out on my back patio leading our Ignite at Home class, and out of the blue, and we don't have I've never seen a hummingbird at our house before. Out of the blue, a hummingbird, as I'm like looking straight ahead of me, and a hummingbird flies and just hovers, just there, like,
Mhm.
zzz, and then it like takes off. And I say to those who I'm leading the class with, I'm like, oh my gosh, because just that morning, Melaine was like, it's Mama Marcia's birthday too.
Aw.
And I told those who I was leading the class with, I said, I just saw my mother-in-law. She just came
Yeah.
to wish me a happy birthday.
Yep.
It was so crazy.
It
So I
is.
believe in all of that. I just think
I do.
that,
Yeah.
again, that's one of the way God communicates with us.
Right.
I believe.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap this up here pretty soon, Cristen, but I just, real fast, you'd mentioned you had been in therapy. You and Alan had been in couples therapy. So that's definitely what I'm always wanting to share in these podcasts is just encouragement and wisdom that you could pass along as a result of your experience. And it sounds like one would be if you've lost someone, if you're in grief or experiencing something really tragic, therapy and help is
Yeah.
necessary.
I think therapy, and I even just did, I found a new therapist that I love. I kind of took a break after, because unfortunately the one I had retired. And so I kind of went through some time with that one and met with a few other ones, and have found one that I absolutely adore. And she helped me. I ended up doing some EMDR therapy, which I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a little bit more, it kind of dives in and digs up the deep rooted stuff that you kind of push down. And it is crazy. Here again, I could tell you stories that you don't believe unless you experience it. Like, it pulls out memories and things. Um,
Can you
but I think
describe
you have,
what do they do? What is the therapy?
so her way, some people do it with light, where you look at a light
Mm-hmm.
that's going off and on. Um, she does it with these little tappers that are in your hands. And I wouldn't say you're not hypnotized by any way, but she just says, okay, we're going to talk about this right now. Can you tell me what you're feeling? And it pulls out, like, I felt like I was standing in a snow globe watching my life going around me. I mean, there were some memories. She was like, what are you seeing now? And then I would tell her whatever memory was popping into my head, and we would kind of go down that and see what that memory was. And sometimes they weren't memories, sometimes it was visual. She explained it. She said, sometimes you're going to be in this, and when you get on it, it's kind of going to be like you're on a train watching your life or watching a series of memories, which was kind of the one where I was in a snow globe and I felt like I was watching my life go on around me. It's supposed to help with triggers. So I was having triggers of things that would just kind of set me off, cause anxiety, or extreme sadness. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's supposed to help. You don't want to numb all your feelings, but you want to help kind of soften those triggers so that when you get them, you can acknowledge them and kind of move on a little bit easier. I had heard of it from some other friends that had gone through some other kind of traumatic things. And I know they use it a lot with people who've been through war or whatever. So it's kind of similar. And I think you have to be trained in it or licensed in it.
Okay. And so would you say it's uh, been transformative in just the healing?
Yes, I think it was. I mean, all of it, I feel like you hit it at certain stages of grief. I think it was at the right time. I mean, I only did it, I think, 3 or 4 sessions, but I think it did help kind of push me over that next ledge of wanting to be happy, have more happiness and have less I don't know what the word is, but uh,
More ups versus more
more
downs.
ups. Yeah. And to know how to handle the downs a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more, acknowledging and the acknowledgement of what it is, and then being able to move on, move past it. So you're
So
never
can you give
moving
an
on.
example of how that's helped you in some of those moments?
One of the visuals that I still use that I got early on was if you go, it's crazy. I'll be in the grocery store and a song that my dad liked will come on, and I mean, just all of a sudden, like tears well up in my eyes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, not now, not now. You
Yeah.
just never know when it's
Mm-hmm.
gonna hit, and so I think instead of trying to force those things down, you may throw on your sunglasses. And
Mm-hmm.
she said, look at it as like a cloud, like you can just watch the cloud go by. It's not going to stay there forever, but it needs to go by. You can't just like shove it back in a box. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think with all of grief, I've kind of learned to acknowledge it. I mean, some other things that they've told me is to name, instead of that we haven't talked much about how Alan and I, but obviously our marriage, it was a little tested during this because I mean
Mm-hmm.
he's had to take care of me and all the affairs and everything. So it gets hard for men because they want to fix
Mm-hmm.
things,
Mm-hmm.
and so he gets mad when I'm sad because he wants to
Mm-hmm.
fix it. And so
Mm-hmm.
one of the great things we just got recently was she was like, you need to name. He needs to not be mad at you for being sad. You need to be mad at the flood or mad at put it on something else other than you. So, I mean, I have a bookload of all those kinds of things. Anytime people say they don't go to therapy, I don't understand it.
So from what I hear is you highly recommend.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
I mean, because we're not equipped to know how to handle these things.
no.
There are
Well, and
people.
you need, yeah. And especially with grief, unless you've been through it before, you don't know, is this normal? Am I ever going to come out of this?
Mhm.
So I think just having someone tell you this is normal and this is, yeah,
Yeah, part of the
and this is
process.
how I felt. Yeah.
Mhm. Um, not a doctor by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that sometimes we want to throw the label depressed on something. And I think, whereas it's like, no, it's just, we're grieving. It's just part of the
Mm-hmm.
process and it won't be forever. But yeah, you probably do feel depressed. Doesn't necessarily
Right.
mean you're a depressed person.
Right.
Whereas you're just cycling through the process.
Right.
And life is really hard at
Yes.
times, and we're going to feel those waves of down. um so you'd mentioned something about Alan. I wanted to just circle. So do y'all still see couple do you are you still in couples therapy?
We are not. He has a somewhat of a life coach, and then I have
Mm-hmm.
mine. And we actually did decide this in December we're going to go visit together, both of them, just so we can maybe get some little pieces and nuggets that each other's getting, but together. So we we've kind of bounced around with some different couples therapies, and I would highly recommend it. It's really hard to find somebody that melds with both
Mm-hmm.
both personalities. So if you can find one that you both like, I think it's so worth it. The lady that I went to go see that retired, she did couples. We did the couples with her, and she was amazing. But yeah, we haven't found anybody that just the two of us go to consistently together.
Yeah, that feels like the right fit. Well,
Hmm.
I wrote this in my notes to you, and I know I shared them with you before, and I didn't touch on this, but I can completely understand how Alan, he's your warrior, he's your protector, your fixer of all things. I can imagine how frustrating
Yeah.
and hard to see you as, grieving and sad and going through your children and him wanting to fix it all and not knowing how to or what to. I can really sympathize. I've learned a lot in my 18 years of marriage that men are just wired so differently and they want to
Yeah.
be able to make it right
Hmm.
for their families. God bless them for that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay, so moving on and closing up, is there any other wisdom or encouragement you want to share to somebody who's, whether or not it's the death of a loved one, the loss of a loved one, or just going through a real hard time? And I should have asked you, I wrote myself this note. Your faith faith and friendship seems to be one of the things that has really guided you through this. Did you have a strong faith before?
Um, told people before I was in Bible studies and things, but I feel like I was always been blessed with a blind faith. Like I have always just, we went through some financial craziness right after we first got married, and I was just like, it's going to be okay. I know God's got this as long as we invite Him into our problem.
Mm-hmm.
If we try to do
Have
it
you ever done a
ourselves,
spiritual gift test?
I have, and I'm trying to remember what my
I would bet you one of your spiritual gifts is faith.
faith. Yeah, I know it's faith, and I think mercy was the other one.
Mm,
Um, so I have been blessed with a blind faith that I feel like I've always had in me. That I don't think, oh, everything's going to be okay, meaning nothing bad's going to happen.
right.
But I feel like you know I I don't I'm not Debbie Downer thinking
Hmm.
it's gonna, oh, this is gloom and doom is more, I don't really have that in me. So
Well, you can acknowledge the difficulty or the hard, but you also, seems to me, you recognize how God will see you through it.
yes,
And you know that to be a fact.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and he's proven it
Hmm.
now in
He can be
many ways.
trusted. Yeah,
It might always be the way you want it, but
no, but and that's a great segue into this. So one of the things I'd emailed you was in church this Sunday. I had written down all the questions that I was going to send you, and then I'd gone to church, and I was just like, oh my gosh, his message spoke so perfectly to me, and the questions that I was emailing you, and more than anything, just your story. And he talked about just how crazy the Christmas story is. Like a virgin
yeah,
was, conceived by the Holy Spirit. Joseph, the earthly father, was the fiance of Mary. He wanted to leave her because she was pregnant with, and what, by the Holy Spirit? That doesn't make any sense. This has never happened in human history. These things don't happen. He wanted to leave her very quietly. He didn't want to shame her publicly, which was very honorable of him. And then he received a dream from a messenger of God, an angel, saying, this baby, like, don't leave Mary. This baby was conceived by the Holy Spirit. It's going to be the savior of the world. I mean, the story of Christmas, when you can look past just like, and a child was born, like, it is crazy. And so it just made me think about your faith is crazy, like in the best kind of way. Your trust in God is unbelievable. And I just wrote here, God showed up and guided the situation and equipped them, Mary and Joseph, and
hmm
you in every way you needed. And so he said in church, our pastor said, when life gets crazy, God gets close. Then he also
mm,
said, when you feel broken, and he said, as Joseph did when he found out his fiance was pregnant before he knew it was with the Holy Spirit, that, conceived by the Holy Spirit, that when you feel broken, that's when God gets close. I would say he gets closer. And when we experience loss, distress, hardship, challenge, struggle, it would be, he's like, flashing lights need to go on. Like God's proximity is close. Like he is
Mm-hmm.
there. And then he referenced this scripture. He said, it's in Psalms 34:48, 4-8. When I needed the Lord, I looked for him. I called out to him and he heard me and responded. He came and rescued me from everything that made me afraid. Look to him and shine. This poor soul cried and the Eternal heard me. He rescued me from my troubles. The messenger of the eternal God surrounds everyone who walks with him and is always there to protect and rescue. Taste of his goodness. See how wonderful the eternal truly is. Anyone who puts trust in him will be blessed and comforted. And then finally, Psalms 34:18. When someone is hurting or brokenhearted, the eternal moves in close and revives him in his pain. And so what I wrote here is, Cristen, I know you didn't choose this, and I'm sure you would love nothing more than to have your family members back with you. But because you were able to choose joy, not being angry at God or asking why, but asking what, and continue to live such a faith-filled, fun, meaningful, and courageous life. Do you agree that God shows up in the middle of these hard times? And did you feel his peace and his comfort? I know you've already covered this, but would you agree with everything that scripture just said?
Yes. And I think it's hard for anybody to imagine until you've been in it. I mean, I just reading that like takes me back to the church parking lot on like day 3 or whatever, and just seeing all the people around and the food and the helicopters and the dogs and the horses, and how what we were doing is such a somber, terrible thing, but people were smiling, and the fellowship. I mean, that is like the true picture of heaven, of, all these people coming together, um, from all walks of earth and all the land. I mean, people came from all over the United States, and and so, I 100% agree with that, because, yeah, I mean, God doesn't show up like that on a typical day when I'm running carpool or anything.
Yes, he's
So I don't
there,
get to
but
see
it's
anything
different.
miraculous like that. So yes, I think, he was not shy about showing everybody, that he was there with us. I even had a few friends who, came to know Jesus more after that, and circled back years later and told me, I now go to church and have a relationship just because I saw what you had. And I'm like, I need to have that if I ever go through something.
Mm-hmm. He never wastes anything,
Right.
ever. And I'd never thought about, but what you had just said, but you saw heaven. That's unbelievable. I would have never thought to extrapolate everything you just said that you saw during that time and think about that is what heaven is. But that is what heaven, that was heaven on earth
Yeah.
just then. Wow. That was beautiful. Thank you. Okay, we're going to wrap it up real fast with some fast 5 questions, some rapid fire.
Okay.
Okay, what's your favorite book?
So just with everything we've been talking about, my favorite book from, that helped me so much, was called Through the Eyes of a Lion. It's
Oh,
Levi
yes.
Lesko.
Leave let's go. Yep.
I just like, I have that whole book highlighted, and I feel like there are just so many good tidbits and, um, visuals that just, I read so many books that didn't do anything, and that one just really stood out. And then my favorite kind of guilty pleasure lately was, the Ellen, Hildebrand's The Winter in Paradise series, because it's just a fun little love story in St. John. So
I'm writing that down. That sounds like a great holiday.
it's a whole series. So yeah, you can picture
That
being on the
sounds
beach.
great. Thank you. I actually have Through the Eyes of a Lion. I never finished it, but I've heard his story. Wow. Talk about a tragic story
Yeah,
turned of faith.
right.
Story of tragedy turned turned into just an unbelievable depiction of faith and love and joy like yours. Do you have a favorite quote?
I think here again, just going off of, I couldn't think of like a quote, but my favorite verse that is probably my favorite quote because I have it on my computer and I recite it in my brain whenever I don't feel like I want to get out of bed is the Philippians 14, 6 or 7, which is do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition. With thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Jesus Christ. Because days when I would just wake up so anxious, not really wanting to get out of bed, I would just try to say that over and over in my head, like, hey, give me that peace that I know you can give me. And usually, I mean, it did. It was like, okay, I can get out of bed today.
Mm-hmm.
So and I still, even when you're stressed about just day-to-day stuff, that's one that I throw at my kids a lot too.
Mm-hmm. And you don't, I remember one time when I was really struggling in college and my dad, I was like, Dad, I don't know how I'm going to get through, blah, blah. And he was like, don't even worry about tomorrow. You just get through the next minute. You
Yeah.
just get through the next hour and you just ask God, God, help me get through the next minute. Help me get through the next
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah.
And he always delivers. He always will.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of quote, totally unrelated, but related because we're talking about quotes. I have stuck on my um glued or not glued, taped to my computer, sweat with the best. Do you remember giving that to me?
Yes. That's so funny.
I still have that.
Oh,
It's
that's
wanting to
awesome.
come off, but I don't want to take it off because you me.
That's awesome.
I love it. How about your favorite concert?
So I would have to say Justin Timberlake put on one of my favorites, but Pink at the ACL festival that we just had has been a close second. And then we got some coveted Taylor Swift tickets.
Oh, how did you swing that?
I sat at my computer for about 8 hours waiting in the queue. And I had to run to a meeting. I was like, y'all, I have to go back and check my computer. And literally, as I walked in the door, it said, please enter your code. I'm like, ah. And I got
Oh,
2 tickets. So
well,
Lauren and I are going.
congratulations. Where and when?
Houston, it was when the Sunday night one in Houston. So you kind of had to take what you got. Like they just assigned
Yeah.
you could pick. Anyway, so I was like, and they're kind of right next to the stage, but kind of on the backside. I'm like, well, we'll just maybe be looking at the Jumbotrons, but we'll be there.
She puts on, I've been to one of her concerts before in Austin with my niece when she was like in the fifth grade or something like that. And that girl can put on a concert. Holy
Yeah,
cow.
I
She's
know. We
quite
talked
the
about do we want to try to sell them and make some money? And like, I don't know. This kind of seems like a once in a lifetime thing now with how hard it is to get these tickets.
seriously. Oh my gosh, that's going to be so fun. Okay. What, if you could go back and tell your 21-year-old self anything, what would that be?
To be flexible and don't sweat the small stuff. Um, and that everything's going to be okay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think I went through a quarter life crisis thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not married yet. And supposed to have babies by 26. And
And now look at you, an
I
18 and
know.
a 15-year-old baby.
Yeah, I know it. It's crazy.
I love that. So true. I think all of us could go back and be like, just chill out, girl. You got this.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then finally, what would you say? This is probably going to be a hard one. The best wisdom you've ever received.
It is hard, but the first thing because when you told me you're going to ask me this, the first thing that came to mind, and this is kind of funny but cheeky. My grandfather, we called him Matt Mac, and he had a slew of Matt Macisms. But he always would say, "You don't get out of this world alive, so get busy living." So
Oh my gosh.
that I feel like kind of encompasses how we live. and how I want to live. We've done a pretty good job trying to
No,
live up to that.
that's gonna be some of my favorite wisdom. I'm carrying that one on. Thank you,
Good.
Mac, for sharing that wisdom and
Yeah.
letting giving it to Cristen.
Yeah.
So, okay, you have a senior in high school, which really freaks me out. So that means not only is he
Hmm.
driving, but he's graduating this year. And I'm
Yeah.
a little bit behind you. So, how was that?
Well, I'll just say, and people told me, to be prepared that the senior year flies by, and I can't believe we're pretty much now at the halfway mark. And I'm sure the spring always seems to go by faster than the fall anyway, but it flies by. I feel like we just put him on the yellow bus, and I cried every time I saw one in kindergarten. So yeah, those people that said, what is it, the days are long, but
Yeah.
the years are short, whatever is true.
Mm-hmm.
Alan and I were just having a conversation the other day because now that he's technically an adult, it's kind of a delicate balance of having another adult in the house, but you're also still trying to parent him. I mean, he did something stupid last weekend. I'm like, do we ground him? Like, what do you do? What do we do?
Yeah, he's a man. He can
I
enroll
know. I'm like,
in the military.
exactly. Well, somebody else told me one of his friends was like, yeah, Trey can adopt a kid now. I'm like, oh, well, that's scary.
What? Wait a second. You can adopt a kid at 18, but you can't buy alcohol?
I don't know if that's just what he said, but I was like, wow, that's kind of scary thought. But
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
it's a
Wow.
delicate balance. I mean, 90% of the time, it's fun getting to treat him as a young adult, but then you get reminded every now and then that, oh yeah, their frontal lobe's still not fully
Yeah,
formed, and they
not
make
fully
dumb
formed.
decisions.
I have been telling Durant that, who's 11, almost 12. I'm like, I'm just going to let you know, there's going to be a time when this thing does not work. It guides you in like not in the right direction. So these are
Right.
some of the dumb things you're going to be tempted to do because your frontal lobe is not like follow one of your friends that's doing something really dangerous and dumb. That's when you have to remember
Yep.
that I told you my brain is not fully formed yet. I don't have the ability to make a decision. So I'm going to go back and remember what my mom told me that there was going to be that one day. Oh my gosh. I'm sure your prayer life is really strong right now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We have a Bible study group that we basically just turned into a prayer group because
Oh
we
my
had so many
gosh.
prayers over all of our kids that it took up the whole time. So
Oh my gosh, I think that's the best wisdom right there. Prayer
yeah.
group when you're well for a period, but when you have
Yeah.
teenage children. Um okay, so for those maybe that is the wisdom. But for those of us like myself who don't have children yet in that age bracket, raising both, a son and a daughter, it's very different. But what wisdom do you have for us? Because how old again is Lauren? She's a sophomore?
She's sophomore. She's 15, so she's not driving just yet. But a lot of her friends are just now starting to get their license, which is crazy because
Uh-huh.
they're the babies, it seems like. And instead,
Right.
now I see them driving around the neighborhood, and it's just crazy. It's been fun to see the interaction between boys and girls. And I do
Mhm.
think I think both of them have a better understanding of the opposite sex because they have a brother or a sister. I mean, Trey was just talking the other day. It's like, yeah, boys are kind of like do 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 do, and girls are like, whoa, oh my gosh, oh, and just kind of over embellish everything. And the boys are like, well, I don't know, I don't care. Kind of.
Right.
Anyway, it was
Oh
just
my
funny
gosh.
that he acknowledged the fact that boys don't think that far. Girls always think that boys are thinking all these crazy things, and he was like, yeah, they don't realize that we're not even thinking about them.
Don't take it personally. I haven't even considered you today. Yeah. I'm just
Exactly.
wondering
Yeah,
what I'm going to have for breakfast. It goes that far.
exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I will say, so for kids, like my key advice, with both of my kids, we have a very open conversations about. I mean, I've always been pretty honest with
Mhm.
my teenage years and how I grew up and the mistakes I made. So I think it's made I mean, I'm sure they don't tell me everything, but I do feel like they tell me more than most. And it just, it creates such a neat relationship that I kind of had with my mom, but it's definitely more open than I feel like in generations past. I feel like that's one neat thing about these generations is the relationships can be a lot more open.
Well, you're kind of forced to have these conversations earlier with them or to be honest because it's
Hmm.
information is so available that if they
That's true.
don't hear the truth from you, like it's going to be a non-truth or a half truth or something that like you don't want them to know that it or the information is going to come from one of their peers
Right.
and that's not how you want them to learn or from somebody else and that's certainly not how you want them to learn some really important or delicate information. We're at the same point and they're 9 and 11 but I'm like
Yeah.
it's my job to be in our job, not my job, but mine and Russell's job. We're here to protect you and teach you, and so I'm gonna have to give you some information and put it in 9 and 11-year-old terms, but it
Yeah.
is, I think, just the information highway has really opened the door to force us to have some more honest. Yeah, the honesty department is a little deeper
Right.
than it once
You could
was.
kind of push it off a little bit longer. I feel like
Yes,
back in the olden days.
that's right. The olden days. Oh my gosh, totally. Well, okay. So prayer group, pray. Just have a Bible study group who you just pray for your children all the time, and then communicate with your children
Yes.
and share with
Hmm.
them your mistakes, the things that you did, and just keeping an open door conversation. I love that. Thank you for that
Yeah.
wisdom. You are amazing. I cannot thank you enough for being so willing to share some what I would imagine is really hard memories, but also just your faith, Cristen, is so beautiful. And again, you live your life in such a way that is worthy of replicating. And
Aw.
you inspire me, and I know your words and just your faith and everything that you shared today is going to inspire others and encourage others, be a source of encouragement to others. And that is the power of we. And that's why we
Yeah.
have this thing and we, just can surround one another and lift each other up and use each other's
Yeah.
experiences to be a source of encouragement to one another. So thank you so
Aw,
much.
thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
you
you,
for
Nisa.
this. You're welcome. Okay, we want to hear updates on Taylor Swift.
Okay. Will do.
Thank you for listening to the Power of We podcast. And if you happen to be in Austin or San Diego, we would love for you to join our fitness community. But if not, I would love for you to join me and our at-home fitness community. Most importantly, thank you for being part of the Power of We family.